Welcome to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. We're going to be talking about the Analogue Pocket in this segment. I'm going to say it again for the algorithm, the YouTube algorithm. The Analogue Pocket. I've got some thoughts on it, not necessarily the hardware itself. I have covered that, not ad nauseum, but I've talked about the Analogue Pocket in at least several episodes of the podcast prior. I don't know if I've uploaded any YouTube videos about the Analogue Pocket or my thoughts on the Analogue Pocket. Is that saying Analogue Pocket enough for you, algorithm? But yeah, I've got some new thoughts in regards to backers receiving them, pre-order orderers receiving their Analogue Pockets, and then just the flurry of reviews we saw hit YouTube as of recording right now yesterday. So I think it was Monday or Tuesday of, it was like December 13th or 14th. What day is it? Mid-December about, depending on when you're watching this. We just saw a flood of YouTube reviews of the Analogue Pocket, which were wonderful. A friend of the show, Colin from This Is Not Compute, did his review of the Analogue Pocket. I hope to talk to him a little bit about the Analogue Pocket coming up. I'm scheduled, I hate saying this before it actually happens, but I'm scheduled to record with him on Friday to do another episode together. And y'all who follow the podcast, which, by the way, Geek Therapy Radio podcast in your favorite podcast player, just look for the red, white, and black color scheme, and that's how you got me. Those of you who have subscribed to Geek Therapy Radio podcast for a long enough time know that I've had Colin on several times, and I have to do like two separate versions. Right now I'm recording this segment for radio, but when I have Colin on, when we record, I don't think we've ever talked for less than an hour and a half. So the way I do my conversations with Colin is I release it as a separate podcast, just freeform, open-ended, no segments, just freeform podcast for an hour, 2 hours, sometimes even longer, where we just talk about all sorts of geeky stuff. Those are some of my favorite podcasts. Colin is one of my favorite guests I ever have on the show, because even if we have no topic, I'll just say, hey, Colin, jump on here. I'll be like, what are we going to talk about? Don't you worry about it. We're going to talk for 2 hours. We're going to go off on so many tangents like I'm doing right now. Analogue Pocket. Colin reviewed the Analogue Pocket. So we saw the flurry of reviews. I have nothing against the Analogue Pocket. I want an Analogue Pocket. As I've mentioned many times over the course of doing the radio show and podcast, I want the Analogue Pocket. I announced it when, very near launch, went over its specs, what it's supposed to have. The, what is it? The screen that's like 1440 by 1600, which is the exact scaled resolution of the original Game Boy, which is, I think, the original Game Boy is 160 by 144, something like that. It's an exact scaling of the Analogue Pocket. It uses FPGA technology, so it's not really emulating. It's kind of making the hardware do actual hardware things of the different systems it runs. The output, the dock, the HDMI output, the Bluetooth, all that good stuff. We all know about that. And that's kind of one of my points here, is we've known about the Analogue Pocket for years. Can I say years at this point? Is it technically years? Has it been over a year and a half? Has it been 2 years since the announcement of the Analogue Pocket? It's been way over a year. And I don't blame Analogue Pocket for the supply chain issues and the delays associated with the pandemic. But what I do, I wanted to use this segment to just kind of explain something that irks me, and then I'm going to go over some details about who's going to get their Analogue Pockets and when at this point, theoretically. I kind of equate the Analogue Pocket to the James Webb Space Telescope that was supposed to launch a decade ago and is now only nearing launch. You know my piece on that. Just briefly, I'll believe it when it's up in the air. I'll believe it when that big satellite son of a gun is up in the sky, with all the delays we've seen over the past decade. Anyway, so the Analogue Pocket. It just irked me over the past couple days as I've been thinking about it. And I just kind of want to explore this thought with all of you, and let me know in the comments below if you're watching this on YouTube. With all the problems that Analogue's had to try to get the Pocket out to customers, and by their own words, the demand has been quote-unquote unprecedented, which I fully believe, of course. With all that struggle, and that's kind of been the main issue in the news recently regarding Analogue Pocket, is production delays and pandemic impacts and things like that. What irked me is it seemed that every reviewer and their mother got an Analogue Pocket this week while so many people were still waiting. Backers are still waiting. People who pre-ordered are still waiting. And I want to explore this idea because I don't think it's necessarily the case that Analogue is trying to hurt anybody. But in my opinion, it just seemed like some bad optics. It was one of those kind of NDA things where, remember the Dyson vacuum like a year or so ago where every reviewer on the planet like dropped a Dyson vacuum video on the exact same day? That's what happened with the Analogue Pocket, and we just saw dozens and dozens of people releasing reviews of the Analogue Pocket. But I'm not just talking about on YouTube, even written reviews for different websites and things. And it's just like it kind of rubbed me the wrong way a little bit that there's so many people who bought and paid for these things, still waiting for these things, yet dozens of reviewers, seemingly dozens, got their units before, backers and people who pre-ordered and spent money on these things. They got it before them. Now, Grant, I know what you're thinking here. Okay, well, a few dozen reviewers, that's not like on the scale of thousands of people who've pre-ordered this, but still, it's kind of like, imagine you were somebody who pre-ordered this, who paid $200 at the time. The price has gone up since then. We'll get into that in a moment. But imagine you sat there as a backer or as a pre-orderer and you've just been waiting and waiting and waiting, and then all of a sudden your YouTube inbox, so to speak, your YouTube screen is filled with dozens of reviews. It's like, where's mine? It just, doesn't that kind of, I don't know. It kind of irks me, and I don't blame any reviewers, absolutely. So Colin, for example, Colin may have got an email probably from Analogue saying, hey, we want you to review one of our units, a pre-production unit, whatever it is, we want to send you one. Great. The review, of course, yes. If I was a reviewer, if I had that much clout, I would want to take the thing too. I think Analogue handled the release of the reviews, the non-disclosure agreement. I think they handled that a little bit with a little bit of bad optics. And maybe I'm just the only one. Am I just the only one? Let me know in the comments below if I'm just the only one feeling this way. Because I would feel real bad if I had pre-ordered this a year ago and then dozens of people got it before me, a paying customer, did. So just a little bit of bad optics on that front. Here's what I hope. And I would like to get somebody from Analogue on the show to talk about this. What I hope is that just because you saw, I mentioned this on Twitter, just because you saw 100 reviews of the product doesn't mean that 100 units went out. It could be that only a handful of units went out and they said, okay, for instance, Colin, this does not compute. You have this for 1 week and you do your review on it and then you package it back up and send it back to us because we'll send it to another reviewer to do their review. So basically, let's say 10 units out in the wild to create 100 reviews. It's just each content creator has it for a segment of time. So perhaps it's not that Analogue just freely gave, 100 units out to reviewers. Maybe it's just that they had a handful, a dozen or so units actually, that they parceled the time out with each reviewer and then said, okay, now y'all wait. But that's still the rub there. Now y'all wait till this day to release the review all at once. I don't think it should have been done like that because it makes it seem like there's hundreds of them out there that aren't in the hands of backers. And that's all I wanted to say about that. As the segment is ending here, I wanted to go over kind of the new pricing, the new kind of pre-orders, what's going on here. This is from Analogue Pocket's the website, pre-order FAQ. The Pocket will be available December 14th. That was a few days ago. As of 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Limit per customer is 2 pockets. Blah, blah, blah. The price has gone up a little bit to $220 for the Pocket itself versus $200. The accessories, according to them, have not gone up in price. Now, the fulfillment, this is what's important. The fulfillment will be in these groups. So if you pre-order this thing, if you're in Group A, you're going to get it Q1 2022. So in a couple months, hopefully. Group B is Q4 2002. And Group C is 2023. No quarter mentioned, just 2023. Anyways, that's all I want to say about that. My segment's ending. I'm not going to hit the post perfectly on this outro music. I just want you to know that you're worthy of love. There's more radio show to come. You're worthy of your own self-respect, your love, giving love, receiving love. There's more radio show to come, so I'll end the show with that also. But thank you for listening to Geek Therapy Radio Podcast if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening to the podcast or on the radio, more Geek Therapy coming up. Don't go anywhere.